Today is Monday, October 11th, 2004. I'm Kathy Bernstein, and I'm going to visit with Phil Cohen. We are celebrating 350 years of Jewish life in America, Phil, and that's why we're trying to capture as much of our Milwaukee Jewish community as possible during this period. So you saw the questions that we sent to you, and so you kind of know the questions I'm going to ask you. And I'd like you to tell me what your full name is, and have you always been Cohen? Cohen is a very important part of the Jewish community. You're a Cohen.
Okay.
Yep, you've
Yes.
got a lot of responsibilities as a Cohen.
Yes. I'm Philip Cohen with two L's.
Two L's, one
Okay,
P.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
There were a lot of Philip Cohens in Milwaukee at one time.
Why?
And I think there's one left, but several of them changed their names.
Two.
Crone, Phil Crone.
Oh, that's interesting.
He was a Phil Cohen. And there was another one they died, but I'm the survivor.
You're the survivor. When were you born in Milwaukee?
I was born in Milwaukee, April 5th, 1919.
Okay. Who were your first family members to settle in Milwaukee?
I think my grandfather Cohen, who came from Russia by himself, left his wife and children in Russia, apparently had like a general store there, and my grandmother ran it while he was gone, and supposedly ran it better than he did when he was there. And when he accumulated enough money, he sent for his wife and children, and my father came over. I think he must have been about 10 years old, and went to school in Milwaukee. My mother was born in Milwaukee, and she was a twin. And my grandfather Kerman had the first kosher delicatessen in Milwaukee.
What was it called?
I can't, maybe it was called Kerman's, I don't know.
The first,
It was down like on 5th or 6th and Valete, and he became ill and had two twin daughters, and someone had to work, and my mother dropped out of high school. I don't think she ever finished high school, to work with her mother, and her mother was, I don't think she was 5 foot tall, but she was some great cook. And the year that I was born, in 1919, they closed the deli, and my grandfather went into the tobacco business.
why? And what made him go into tobacco?
I believe my uncle Lou Berman, who was married to my mother's twin, had a brother, Ben Berman. And Ben Berman, I think, worked for the American Tobacco Company and knew the tobacco business. And they opened up a small jobbing business on North Water Street, which came to be a big jobbing business.
Is that Kerman?
D. Kerman Company.
We
My
have
father-
a great
my-
picture
my-
of I think a truck that you gave us, a beautiful picture.
My grandfather was Dave Kerman.
Uh-huh.
And I was the first grandchild on the Kerman side. And I must say a favorite because of that. And I was very much influenced by him. I worked for him when I was in high school, and when I went to Extension here in Milwaukee before I went to Madison. And he had a great influence on my life.
In what way? In business, ethics?
He wanted me to be a pharmacist. Never made it. But he, in fact, when I was in the service, I was going out with a Gentile girl. It was quite serious. And she was a beauty. And I came home for my grandfather's funeral, and I went back. I never saw her again. And she kept on calling me and this and that. Because I realized the Jewishness that was in me. And that I wouldn't do it to him if he was living, and certainly wouldn't do it to him if he was dead. Not so much my parents, I don't believe, but my grandfather.
You were with him.
My grandfather, Cohen, was also in the tobacco business, and that's how my parents got together. Their parents were competitors.
Oh.
And he died when I was, I think maybe 10 years old. And my grandmother, Cohen, was a diabetic and had both of her legs amputated. And she was bedridden for many years and lived with my uncle, who was the oldest brother.
That's how things were then.
That's how things were then.
Was your family, your parents, in their everyday life? I mean, you knew you were Jewish. Did your mother light candles? Did you speak Yiddish in your house?
Didn't speak Yiddish in my house, but in my grandparents' house, both grandparents, both of them being Orthodox. My grandfather, Kerman, and I don't know if there was someone called the Gitta Yid. Was that Twersky's father?
I don't know.
Who came to Milwaukee. He was the head of the temple on 11th and Garfield. And my grandfather would never make a business decision
Sounds like it.
unless he conferred with him, large or small. And my Cohen grandparents were members, I think, which was then the original Beth Israel, which was on Titonia Avenue.
Right.
And the Cohen parents were Russian, and the Kermans were Austrian, and my grandfather Kerman used to needle my father about that he was Russian, you know. And he was one of the Cohens, one of the competitors.
So you were raised in a Jewish.
Oh yes, and when I was younger, and when my parents were younger, they kept kosher, but later on did not. They were members of Bethel on 49th and Garfield, and I went to Hebrew school there and was bar mitzvah there. We lived on 59th and Washington Boulevard, and that was a good mile, maybe a little more than a mile. And used to walk there
For sure.
in the cold
Yeah.
at the Hebrew school.
It That's interesting. So you went to Hebrew school. You didn't have a Malamed who came to you?
No, I went to Hebrew school at the temple.
All right. So,
And, yeah, go ahead.
no, so you went to high school where?
Washington.
Oh, of course. It was wonderful then.
Yeah. And I was the Aleph Gadol of AZA 239. Went to a lot of AZA conventions, not a lot of, maybe 2, 3, around the country.
Right.
One I remember in the Ozarks, one in New York. I think that one in New York was when Ben Barkin was elected to be the head of the AZA.
Right.
And
When you were in high school, was your neighborhood? I have a couple questions about your neighborhood. Did you have non-Jewish friends?
yes. In the Depression, my father lost the house on Washington Boulevard, and we moved to 50th and Locust, and was 59th and Washington. There were Jews there, but it wasn't a Jewish neighborhood, I don't think. It was a block from Wauwatosa, Washington Highlands, which I don't think had many Jews at all. But on 50th and Locust, it was predominantly Jewish, I believe.
Did relatives live near you? Were you close with your family or extended
Oh,
family?
yes,
Did you have Shabbos together?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
different-
We used to go to Shabbos to my grandparents' Kermans. They lived on High Mount Boulevard. And my grandfather Kerman, who had a very limited education, after the delicatessen business, he somehow had an agreement, and he was the Manischewitz distributor for Wisconsin and northern Michigan, and had a contract that Manischewitz tried to get out of it later on. It was so tight, they had to pay him good.
They had to pay your
My grandparent,
grandfather?
my grandfather good, to get out of it. I think my grandfather probably was dead already, and paid my Uncle Phil Kerman, who was running the business, and he was the distributor for Willow Kosher products also, which was a carryover from the deli.
Okay. Interesting that your Uncle Phil and you're a Phil. For whom are you named, by the way? And what's your Hebrew name?
I have no middle name.
No, what your Hebrew name?
Come on, Shraga Feivel,
Shraga Feivel Ben. What was your
Ben Yaakov.
Ben Yaakov HaKohen.
Yeah. There were a lot of Phils. On the Kerman side, there was Phil Levine, and Phil Kerman. Myself was a Phil. I think there was another Phil. My grandfather had a nephew who lived with them and died of the flu and is buried at Spring Hill, and I think he was a Phil.
With that flu
Yeah.
epidemic of 1918.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you were in AZA, you were in Aleph Gadol, you were happy, you had a good time at Washington.
Mm-hmm.
You had Jewish friends.
A lot of Jewish friends, a lot of Gentile friends, though.
Did you witness experience any anti-Semitism growing up?
Not really.
You didn't?
I really didn't.
Uh-huh.
Nor did I really in the Army.
How about when you, in other, later in life, when in business, did you ever, some people did?
Well, the toy business was a Jewish industry.
Was it? I don't know.
Yeah, it was a Jewish industry.
Okay, well, we're going to back up a little, because
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
to
sure.
talk to you.
We're
about-
ahead of ourselves.
Yes, we are. So when you graduated from high school, you went to the UW Extension and you
Yeah.
went to Madison. Where'd you meet Mickey? Madison?
No, I met Mickey in the Army.
Oh,
Yeah, I met Mickey in the Army.
Mickey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why in the Army? Was she in the Army?
No, I was stationed at the Richmond Air Base,
Yeah.
and she lived in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
And I met her at the temple the first weekend that I was in town. There was a dance at the temple, and there were 4 of us officers who had just been transferred. They just started the Richmond Air Base as an Army base. It was the Richmond Airport. And we went to the temple, and her mother was at the door. It was like a USO thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that was for enlisted men, it wasn't for officers. And my mother-in-law tells the story that I said that I want to just dance with that girl over there, which was Mickey.
Mm.
And I guess I got in.
I guess you did. Go back a little bit, because you told me before we started the interview that you weren't drafted. How did you end up? You went to Madison. Did you graduate? Or did you
I was 4 credits short
graduation.
graduation when I was going to be drafted.
Oh, okay.
I went to summer school the summer before I went in the Army in Madison. And the day before I would have been drafted, I enlisted because you could choose your branch of service if you enlisted as opposed to being drafted and go wherever they would send you. And I enlisted in the Air Corps, and I went to Scott Field in Belleville, Illinois, and they sent me to clerical school in Fort Logan in Denver, Colorado. And I was there on December 7th, 1941. I graduated from there and went back to Scott Field, and they were talking about starting 2 air bases, and they were going to take the personnel from Scott Field to establish these 2. And one was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and the other one was in Madison, Wisconsin. Well, I went to everybody there that I don't want to go to Sioux Falls, I want to go to Madison. And I must have done it to one of the right people. I was a sergeant then. And I was one of the first 4 soldiers that were at Truex Field. And I went, the first class that they had in September, it had to be 42, yeah, for officer school. I went to officer school in Miami Beach. And I graduated from officer school as 2nd lieutenant and was assigned to Atlantic City, New Jersey. And 4 of us went out and hung out a 4-day drunk. And I came to Atlantic City and they said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Couldn't get transportation." "You were on a shipment that went overseas yesterday. We'll make you permanent party and we'll put you on the next shipment." And I was there 2.5 years. That was
How did that happen?
Well, I must say I was pretty good. And there were a lot of people there that weren't.
Okay.
So if I came up for shipment, they scratched me.
To keep you.
Hmm And I stayed there a long time.
So you never went overseas? Or
I was the most lucky person, lucky Jew.
I should
You
say.
know, all of us Jews are lucky. When I got married,
Yeah, you met Mickey at a
USO,
USO.
and I was stationed in Richmond for 6 months
Okay.
and transferred to Camp Davis, North Carolina. And we decided we were going to get married. We met in October, and we got married the following August, okay?
It's a short engagement.
Well, that was war.
Sure it was.
But the week before I was to get married, my name came up to go on a shipment to China. And there was a colonel there, and he says, "You can't send him. He's getting married next week." So they scratched me.
Oh, boy.
And while I was on my honeymoon, we were in Atlantic City. And I went in there and saw the people of the Army that I had been with, and that was in August. And they said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Camp Davis, North Carolina, but they're going to close that down. I don't know where I'm going to be." They said, "How would you like to come back here? They just sent Johnny Leary to China. He was the fellow that they sent in place of me, and I got his job in Atlantic City."
Talk about
Back,
muscle,
so I was lucky. And then the war was over, and I was, they were going to close up Atlantic City. And there was a colonel that said, "If you ever need a favor, call me, Phil." Well, I called him, and I got transferred to Pauling, New York, which was a beautiful place on the Hudson River. And it was the former Pauling Boys School. And they had soldiers there that were severe combat fatigue. And what their program was, they worked with the kennel clubs of New York, and they gave each one of these soldiers a dog. The dog lived in better quarters than they.
Why did they do this?
You were supposed to take care of that dog
I
and
see, to help bring them back.
bring him back, yeah.
Something warm and loving.
Yeah, and I stayed there till I was discharged in December 1942.
That's very interesting about this dog thing. Do you know if they continued doing that in any other wars?
I don't know.
You and Mickey were married then,
Yes,
and when was your first child born? And okay, but did you come back to Milwaukee?
came back to Milwaukee.
And what did you do?
I had an idea of processing returning veterans of all the benefits that they were entitled to. And I wanted to sell it to the Boston store.
I don't understand what that means. You had an idea of processing their benefits and
A lot of, when you came back from the Army, you had benefits, educational benefits,
Right,
this,
GI Bill,
yeah, this, all sorts of things. And a lot of veterans didn't know everything that they had coming
Okay.
and didn't know how to get them if they did know. And I thought that I had been a personnel officer. I knew what they were entitled to and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
And it went on for quite some time for them to make the decision not to do it, okay? during that period, my father said to me, "You're not working, have no income. Why don't you," he had started the toy business while I was in the service. "Why don't you come to work until you can find something better?" Apparently, I never found anything better.
But I want to go back to this thing with the veterans. You said you wanted to sell it to the Boston store. Sell what?
Sell the idea they should pay me, and they should be the sponsor of that type of program.
So in other words, the Boston store would and the veterans should go to the Boston store
Yeah.
and meet with you, and you'll tell them what.
And staff,
Why
yeah.
would you pick the Boston store? Why wouldn't you pick something else? Why the Boston store? I mean, I'm just
Well,
wondering.
it was a retail, and all these veterans came back. Some of them had some money. They needed things.
I
They needed
see.
civilian
I
clothes.
see. So they turned you down.
They turned me down. It wasn't serious consideration for several months.
So what happened to those veterans? Nothing.
Nothing.
They lost a lot of benefits.
No, well, yeah, probably.
So you came home and Dad had started the toy business. How did he get into toys from?
Nothing.
We are in tobacco. We're in delis.
Well, my father worked for Kerman at that time in the tobacco business. And a lot of his customers during the war were interested in toys. And he wasn't apparently very happy there. He was the son-in-law, and there was his son, and others that had been there before. My father's family went for the tobacco before the Depression, when there was a boom in the 20s. They went in the real estate business. And they had money, and they bought some choice real estate and subdivisions. However, everything was mortgaged, and when the Depression came, they got wiped out. And my father went to selling life insurance, and that wasn't easy. And then he went to work for my grandfather at Kerman.
Okay.
And he was working there when I was in the Army. In fact, my father was a heavy smoker. And when I went in the Army, he said he would not smoke again until I got out. And he didn't. However, he died of lung cancer.
Did he go back after you came home? Did
No.
he go back? No?
No, never smoked.
But he died of lung cancer.
Uh,
So the toy business, how did he start? How does one start?
we started very small.
Well, you bought a bunch of toys at a price and sold them?
Yeah, we were jobbers. And there were a lot of jobbers in Milwaukee at that time. There was Consolidated, which were the Silverman family. There was Cash. There was Marcus. There was Maury Oram.
Maury who?
Oram, O-R-U-M, who was Jewish, who ended up in Door County. There was another one, Region Sales. There were a lot of toy jobbers. There aren't that many toy jobbers in the United States today as there were in Milwaukee.
Do you know why?
Because you couldn't make any money.
I see. So
All the customers, every city had jobbers like that. And what happened is my cousin Jerry Berman worked for Kerman. And Local 248 of Alice Chalmers, the auto workers union there had a big strike, and they wanted to get toys wholesale for their members. And Jerry sent them to me, and we made an arrangement. And we sent a Tinker toy and a Tonka truck and a Monopoly game and a this and a that there. And they had it in the Union Hall. And they would get orders, 27 of this, 12 of this, 19 of this. And they gave us the money, and we supplied their members with toys at Christmas. The next year, some of the other unions wanted to get into it. And it just happened that year, Charlie Labatsky, Goodyear Tire and Rubber, decided to go out of the toy business.
I didn't know they were ever in it.
Yeah, they were in it. They supplied a lot of the Goodyear stores around the country. They were a big user. And they decided to go out of it, must have been September.
Of what year?
It must have been
About.
50.
Okay.
And Charlie came to me and said, "What can you buy?" I said, "I have no money. I couldn't buy any size of it. But I know some people who could use sizable amounts. And if we can make a deal, I'll see how much I can sell." He still hadn't bought it. He still hadn't bought it. And I went to Detroit, and one day I sold $250,000 worth of stuff and came back with $100,000 in cash, in a suitcase full of cash. Then Charlie bought that deal. And that was the first year, and we rented Serbian Hall. And it was sponsored by the Milwaukee AFL-CIO, and it was started the day after Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and we were going to run for a week or 10 days. We had people standing out in the snow for 2 hours waiting to get in. And we had all this stuff from Goodyear, which were just fantastic buys. And I ended up, I sold the whole deal for Charlie. He
How
told
long did it take? Not long.
After the first of the year, I sold all that was left to one of the department store groups. That's when the department stores were still in the toy business.
Yeah.
One that Schuster's was in. I can't remember the name of the group. But after that, the union in Lansing, Michigan had heard about this, and they wanted to do it. And I went to Lansing, Flint, Detroit, Chicago, all with the unions. And we ran for 30 days, and it was a big business. We did, at that time, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, we did $5 million.
And what
Which
year
ta-
is this about? Around?
That had been in the late 50s, early 60s. And if that in today's dollars would be like 25 million. We had no competitors. Anybody that was sane enough to try to do something like that, there weren't anybody that was crazy enough to try it. And I got in with Mattel and Hasbro and all the big companies, and I used to buy their overruns. And what I couldn't use myself, I sold to the other people, Toys R Us, people like that, who wouldn't buy the whole thing. And I had a very, very good relationship with those companies. In fact, I couldn't have done it. Credit manager at Mattel believed in me. He knew that by the statements that I could give him, he shouldn't give me that kind of credit, but he did, and he always got paid. I bought the first closeout of Barbie doll. That's when they had a straight leg Barbie, and
I didn't think Barbie ever sold out or closed out.
yeah, I had Ken. That's where they stuck me with, because then they were discontinued Ken at that time. A friend of mine, Bernie Loomis, but I had a warehouse in the International Harvester buildings, and I had a floor just loaded with Barbie and Ken dolls, block long.
So what did you ever do with them?
Sold them.
You did sell them.
Sold them.
How did you sell them, Phil?
I used to go. I had a lot of people that are out of business today. Tops, which is a big discount store, Spartan Atlantic,
Oh, sure.
those people all out east. And I used to go out and I used to come back with 4 or 5 days, $500,000 worth of business.
So you were a real salesman.
Well, I had good stuff to sell too.
But you had the personality.
Yeah,
You must have been a very
they became my friends. They became my friends, and when Tops went bankrupt, which was interstate department stores, big money, I didn't get stuck for one dime. I was plenty lucky. I got some others that I got stuck pretty good by, but not with them.
You liked the business world.
Oh, yes, I did.
You were chairman of the board of retail company,
Yeah.
you say, in New York in the 1970s.
Well,
Chairman
in
of-
1968,
Yeah.
going back, the union came to me, and Harvey Kitzman, who was the regional director here in Milwaukee of the UAW, and said that our retirees are, like today, can't handle the prescription costs. And how would you like to go in with prescriptions, something like you had
Oh,
in toys?
interesting.
And I said, if I really liked it, I'd lay down till it passed over, because I don't need any more.
Uh-huh.
He says, well, do you have any friends who are pharmacists? And Ben Veely had a small professional pharmacy downtown in one office building with no parking. Sold to the doctors in that building. And I met with him, and we convinced them that the UAW would send out a letter to their retirees, tell them that they could come there and get a discount. It wasn't 10 days later, Ben called me. He says, how do I get out of this? I said, how do I get out of this? What's the matter? He says, the building's going to throw me out. I got
Too much.
20, 30 people waiting all the time. I can't handle it. I said, I think it's a problem, but I think it's a good problem. So we met, and he had a partner, another Don Jones, and they had no money, and they got $50,000 worth of credit from McKesson, and I had a pension fund, and the pension fund put in $50,000. We had $100,000, and we opened up 2 pharmacies in Milwaukee.
What were they called?
Union Prescription, which grew to 100 stores, which could have been the largest prescription business in the country, except in '68, I merged with Joe Zilber. He wanted to get in the prescription business, okay? And he didn't want the toy business. I said, well, you can't divide them up. All right, we'll take the toy business. And we made a deal. And the day that it was announced, he was in a nursing home business at that time, Unicare. His stock went up $22. They announced the merger with my businesses. Unfortunately, I got very little money. I got stock in the company, and the nursing home business never did good, okay?
Can I ask you something about the pharmacy? Phil, was he interested in it because of his sister, Fanny Kesselman, and her husband? Aren't they?
Joe? Yeah. Well,
was
yeah.
there a connection there with Bill?
Well,
and
yeah. Bill and Joe were partners in some nursing homes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was a pharmacist, wasn't? Oh no, he was a teacher.
No, he was a pharmacist too, I think. He was a pharmacist. He was a pharmacist.
So I wondered if that was the connection.
No. He wanted to service his nursing homes with prescriptions. Okay. But then there was a customer of ours in New York, Job Lot Trading, the push cart, who I had become quite friendly with. He had one store in New York, and he came to me, he says, Phil, I got cancer. I'm not going to live a year. My 2 boys don't want it. My partner can't run it. Why don't you buy it? And Joe and Jerry Stein and I went to New York and met with him. And at dinner, 2 hours, we made a deal to buy the business. Really stole the business because he was certain he was dying, and he lived maybe 20 years after that. He and I worked together, and I went, and the deal was I was going to go to New York for 1 year till I could hire somebody to run it. And I hired somebody who was terrible. I wasn't very good at hiring successors. In the Union Prescription, no. But that business became, we did, he said he did $14 million in the one store downtown with no advertising. And how do you do this? He says, you buy it and you pay me and you'll find out. But he was honest. And we got that store up to $20 million.
What was the name of it?
Job Lot Trading, the push cart. we had to lock the doors. People, it was in the Wall Street area, downtown New York. And I used to go to New York every Monday morning, either from Florida or Milwaukee, come back at Thursday night. I did that for 8 years, for the 1 year. And had an apartment there in New York, a terrific apartment, 38th floor, penthouse apartment.
Oh, nice.
Had a chauffeur,
Oh, my goodness.
an expense account that Joe said he didn't have any 10 people in the company that spent as much money as I did. And I says, that's right. When we came, and I didn't put anything in, but I lived very good, okay? Ate in the best restaurants, had a chauffeur, and I said, I'm not going to go on any subways or taxi cabs. When I wanted to get out of that, it was we hired somebody, and then I sold the business for Joe. Because the people that had bought it didn't do very well with it. And didn't do very well when I hired a successor in Steve Appel.
That's true.
And I was thrilled to hire Steve.
When was that?
That was in 1988. That was in 1988. And, when I got out of Job Lot, the fellow who was running Wisconsin Toy said that a competitor had given him an offer of a job for $250,000. He says, what should I do? He says, I think you should take it. Which he did. Lasted a couple of years. He came back and came back to work for us. But I had to go back in the toy business, okay? And that's when we took Wisconsin Toy public. And it was a good company.
What was your favorite toy you ever sold?
Mickey just, on my 85th birthday, she had this woman that makes all the rabbis and all that. Did you see at these shows? Okay. Made a figure of myself attached with toys and job lot card and union prescription mug and all that. But Dawn doll, we bought Dawn, which was a knockoff of Barbie. The company went bankrupt. And I don't know, I have the article down in Florida. We bought more Dawn dolls than there were girls in this country. But we sold them all.
Did you really?
We sold them all.
So which was your favorite, Dawn?
Dawn was one of the big ones. And she found, a friend of mine had a Dawn doll, and she got an original Dawn doll on that. I got it at home.
Very cute.
But you are not into some of the Jewish things I did.
No, and we have about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, so we better talk about it. But
Yeah.
I found that just talking about the business, I love to hear how one thing starts another, and for someone like me, It's really very interesting, and I'm sure for other viewers in the future. Let's talk
Like
about your
Al,
Jewish
Al
life.
Stein Al Stein was a good friend of mine, Pill and Puff.
Yeah, sure.
He always said that I was the luckiest guy around. And Mickey told him, he says, you know, the harder he works, the luckier he gets.
Yeah, it seems to be. So what did you do Jewishly? You were pretty busy going back and forth between
Well-
Milwaukee and what was your favorite, you're a very generous person to this Jewish community anyway, and I know in Florida, because you told me.
I was on the board of Temple Sholem, chairman of the building committee for the first addition when they built the school. Mickey and I were honored by the Hebrew University here in Milwaukee.
Okay.
I'm a fellow at Brandeis. I was on a board of when I lived in Fort Lauderdale, the Jewish Federation in Fort Lauderdale. And then in Boca at St. Andrews, which is one of the outstanding, it's the #1 country club in the United States for the Federation. I think that
Some
St.
fundraising or something?
Yeah, I think that St. Andrews, where we have 300 and some members, raised close to $8 million for the Federation, women and men. And a good share of what all of South Palm Beach County raises. We have a few Milwaukeeans at St. Andrews. We got Mel Schlesinger, Steve Marcus, myself, Danny Katz, come on, Dick Sychik. I think that's all. But it's all single-family homes. And it's a very, very active Jewish committee.
I want to ask you a question. Where, as I said, I know how generous you are financially, philanthropically. Where'd you get that from?
Where did we get the being generous?
Yeah, where'd you get that from?
I also was the honoree for the toy industry in New York, the biggest dinner they ever had. At the Pierre Hotel. I was making good money when I worked for Joe. Joe never gave me a raise. Never got a raise. I worked from Joe from 68 to 89 and never got a raise. Do you know anybody that ever worked that long and never got a raise? We made the original agreement that we had was that I was to get $150,000 a year and 15% of the pre-tax profits over $1 million. And all the money that I made, and at one time, and it's different today because I see the numbers that are published of what officers of public, I was the third highest paid officer of a public company in the state of Wisconsin. And I made like $700,000 at that time. But I made on that percentage big money. And then it was at that time, could have been real big, and I gave half of it to my employees. And was a funny thing, well, not funny, that year that I was picked by the toy industry, I had pledged $50,000 in Milwaukee and $50,000 in Florida. When I went to Florida, my attorney here said, you're going to be a Florida resident. I've been a Florida resident for a long, long time. He says, you got to do in Florida. So I called the Federation. First place I told the Federation here I was going to do it. They weren't too happy. I called the Federation there, and I said, I'm a new resident down here, and I think maybe at that time I gave him $25,000. And I started we lived at Bonaventure then, and of all the Bonaventure, they hadn't collected anything. And we started that. We started Israel Bonds down there. Yes, thank you.
We're going to wind this up in 5 minutes. I want to find out where your stuff came from, the idea. This came from your father, or your grandfather, or your mother.
No, I think it just came to me. Just came to me. I didn't need any more money. I lived very, very well, and I've been to Israel maybe half a dozen times, and I wanted to help Jewish people. And my son, and he is very, very charitable.
Jay?
Yes. And he established something with the Federation in San Francisco, I think, $300,000, and I think he gives them what that makes. But he's very, very charitable in the community. Been honored many, many times with AIDS organizations. He's very, very well known. My daughter, I don't think so. And sort of gets to me. And now she's where she can afford it. But I'm working on her.
Well, I know you and Mickey have been very, very kind to this community through the years, and we're grateful.
Mm-hmm.
We really are. Yeah, go ahead.
Community's been good to us.
Well, this community, people like you who make a gift here and make a gift in their winter communities, and I love it. And people say, well, I made my living here, and it's, but some people don't remember that.
Oh, I down in Florida, when I was soliciting, I gave in New York. I gave checked it out. No way.
I know that. It's
No way.
makes fun.
It got to me to the point that I don't take it. For 2 years now, I haven't taken a card down there. And there's a question there about what do I see for the Jewish community.
Right. And then
Unfortunately, I don't see a lot. I see intermarriages that, and some work out very, very well. You know that. But my daughter has been married 3 times. She married a Jewish fella, nice Jewish family. Didn't last the year. She was married to Jeff Abraham, and I think they were married 8, 9 years. Didn't work out. Her present husband wasn't born Jewish, but I kid him, how could you make the same mistake twice? He converted and married a Jewish girl, divorced her, and now married another one? Come on, Bill.
So it's a good...
They've been married, I think, 17 years.
Good, wonderful.
Have 2 sons, one adopted and one after she couldn't have any children at 44 had a child.
That's lovely.
And he has a daughter from a previous marriage who's going to be married this summer to a non-Jewish, and she was raised Jewish.
You never know. We're almost out, okay.
Okay.
All right, well, I want to thank you, Phil, for coming down and sharing your interesting story. I found it very interesting. I love to hear about it and all the inner workings of business. And I wish you a healthy, happy New Year to you and Mickey and all your children, and a nice winter.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, sir.
I'm going to someday write a book. It'll sell at the dollar stores.
You want a drink? And before you take off your microphone?
Get me unhooked, yeah.